all of our engineers go through the same first year program, and then they split into their disciplines with their second year. So they go into mechanical or biomedical or that kind of thing after their first year on campus. So that first year engineering program is all taught out of what's now the School of Engineering Education. And they were going through an intentional process of bringing in faculty from outside of engineering education to teach the first year program, or teach within the first year program. And they were really wanting to disseminate the active and project-based learning that they use in that to get it out into some of the other areas within engineering, and try and build those skills. And so they were looking for people to help teach. It is one of the programs that I am the library liaison to, so I am the liaison to engineering education. And so that, with my engineering background, meant that the head of the program, when he was establishing this faculty fellow program, came to me and said, I think you would be a perfect fit for this. We would love to see you in there teaching in first year engineering. And so I was able to take advantage of this process and this program that they were putting into place to help disseminate better or new or different educational practices within the College of Engineering here at Purdue. In a slightly different fashion, my work sort of in the next bullet that's there, in the Transdisciplinary Studies in Technology program, this was a new degree that has been created at Purdue in the last 3 or 4 years. And this is specifically a competency-based education program that was being developed. And at the start of the development, they put a call out for any faculty across all areas of campus who might have any interest. The degree development was intentionally sort of across all of your different fields within the campus. We like to tell the students who are majoring in this that pretty much the entire course catalog is open to them as long as they're meeting the prerequisites for a class to whatever class they want to take. This really started as the library's faculty responded because we needed to get somebody in there to make sure the information literacy was being embedded into the new degree. And what better way to do that than when they're starting a new degree? And so you can get right in at the ground floor and make sure that those information literacy pieces are part of the conversation and are part of the way the classes are developed right from the start. That moved into a much bigger role, and so I've continued to be involved with them in doing developmental work and course development work as things have morphed over the last couple of years. And really that has turned into then opportunities to co-teach as a co-instructor of record in the core courses within this program. And really having the group of people who are administering as well as teaching this degree take full advantage of the fact that we're bringing different disciplinary perspectives to the table when we're having these students do the design kind of work that's in this degree. In both of these cases, and this is a practice that we've really been trying to start here at Purdue and abide by, when we are being asked to sort of step out of our library space and teach in other programs, we're really trying to make sure we're having the conversation at the other college or school or department level, depending on who's having the conversation, that this is a need to buy out our time. This is not something that is principally part of what we would typically be doing. And so very much like a department would need to hire an adjunct or buy out somebody else's time to get faculty from another department to come help and teach, they need to then pay for whatever part of our time they are asking for in this course teaching mode. Generally, a typical 3 to 4 credit hour class, that means about 25% of your time. And while on some level that feels high, there are plenty of semesters if you are teaching a full class, particularly if you don't have a lot of grad student support or something like that to help with grading and such, that 25% of your time is actually kind of a lowball number on how much time you're spending in teaching some of these classes. But those were some of the opportunities that developed just as a result of new things happening on campus or new initiatives where they put out calls for people that we chose to respond to. And so those have led to the opportunities I've had. New course development has been happening in a variety of other places. I've got 3 examples here. We have other opportunities and things that we have done, but I didn't get a chance to sort of catch up with everybody. So in this new course development, and of the 3 classes that are there, that really represents the work of 3 different colleagues that I have. So I have a colleague, he has his PhD and did his postdoc in bioinformatics. And when he was hired here on campus, really looking at bioinformatics as the focus to the job he was hired in, he really saw a need to teach an introduction to R. So the statistical package, the open source statistical package R, which is being used more and more by researchers across disciplines, but particularly in the sciences. He was able to sort of take a look at the curriculum and see where there was a gap in what's being offered, and know that with the gap that he could see, he was able to leverage his skills and really put this class together. It's a summer class, so among things that he suggests, sort of looking for those times that are sort of uncontested for teaching. And so a lot of the faculty don't like to teach in the summer, that's their research time. But then also, if you're conscious about really rolling in active learning techniques, and being conscious of student self-determination, their autonomy, the relatedness of the coursework, it can really set you aside and set you apart from what else may be going on in the department, which will help build some of your credibility as well. Within agriculture, a lot of the work here has led into a data management kind of piece. This particular librarian is an MLS, and she's got 20 plus years as an agriculture librarian, but no educational background in agriculture. And the things that she's doing there, she's doing a couple of 8-week undergraduate classes, as well as, I have my notes alongside me here, so sometimes I may look off to the side, a 16-week honors class, and some graduate seminar work, all of which have grown out of both regular liaison connections and contacts with the department. And then part of that started from reaching out to researchers and figuring out what their data needs were and where those connections were and what we could serve for them. And that develops into, what are those other skills that my graduate students need? Oh, well, there aren't any really courses in that. Well, the libraries can help step up and create some of those courses, and help build either data management protocols within a lab, helps establish some of those, what are the best practices, or what are our naming conventions, where are we saving things, how are we collecting the metadata about this file, all of those pieces that then help somebody pass that data on just to the next graduate student within a lab, but then can assist in the next steps, as we've all talked about, open data and sharing your data from research, not just sharing the published outcome. So that's some of what's gone on in agriculture here. And then the interesting one, within anthropology, our GIS librarian. And so our GIS librarian actually has her PhD in ecology and was using GIS in that study and in those works. And so that gave her sort of the background to come into this job. And this is a particular course that was developed that's specific to GIS for humanities and social sciences, and it's being offered through anthropology, interestingly enough. But this was one of those opportunities that grew out of working with the researcher and their lab and understanding what they needed and what they were looking for. And so building off of not just sort of what she was seeing in the work with the researcher, but actual student requests for, you know what, we need to know this stuff better. And so being able to then take that and develop the course and move forward with that. In all of these cases, and some of these will sort of come up on my next slide with tips and advice, all of these have been outgrowths in one form or another of our typical liaison work. I know when I hear that kind of a statement, I've had a lot of those sorts of, oh heavens, my administrators are saying, well, that's part of your liaison work. You do that already. And having that moment of trepidation or fear when I think, I think they think I'm doing things I'm not doing in my liaison work, or I think they think those connections are a lot stronger than I feel like they really are. Um, I think it's true for all of us. Our liaison work varies dramatically based on who we're talking to and how open those particular faculty or departments or programs are to different sorts of things. So a lot of these kinds of advantages and opportunities will grow out of those strong typical liaison connections we already have. So those are the places, obviously, we have our recurring teaching opportunities, but then they also can be those department connections and those champions. They're going to help you move this from a recurring one-shot kind of lecture into how do we expand this? How do we make this into something bigger, something more consistent? How do I become an instructor of record in your program if that's an appropriate step to be taking? Some of the things that we've seen, some of the ways to sort of take those next steps, make that transition happen. When you do get called to come in, do a guest lecture, do a one-shot sort of instruction, take the opportunity to talk about the course in a broader sense. So not just what's the laundry list of things that you want me to cover in 50 minutes or try and cover in 50 minutes. Find out what they're doing within the larger structure of the class. Figure out if they have particular pain points or places where what they're trying to do isn't working quite as well, or perhaps spaces where the students struggle. What I have found and what my colleagues have found in many cases is that faculty don't realize where the skills and the information science pieces that we bring to the table intersect with some of what they're trying to do. And so they see us in this little box that's this library service thing, and they can come teach my students how to use the library. And when you have that larger conversation about, well, it's not just finding the materials and it's not just the mechanics of citing, but it can be about how do I synthesize this information, or how do I build these threads or create the literature review, or you're asking them to do all of these things. Are you grading them on, are they including things? And so where are the places that you can step up and help? And obviously that requires some of that conversation with your own administration on, is this part of our mandate? Is this where we're going? Does it make sense for me to spend part of my time in maybe what would have been my time sitting on a reference desk at some point in functioning as a co-instructor or a collaborator in a particular class? You do want to be careful as you move into those roles to be sure that we don't get sort of stuck in a glorified TA kind of spot, because as professionals, that's obviously not the role we want to be in. One of the other hurdles or pieces that people will often see is sort of that, okay, great, you're going to develop a new class. How on earth do I get it listed? How does it show up in the catalog? How does all of this happen? And this is where that department champion and connection can come in really helpful, whether that happens to be an administrative assistant, an associate dean, the head of the program. That has really varied depending on who the librarian is and what their connection with the program happens to be. Some of the things that we've seen, and the faculty themselves do this within their disciplinary departments, leveraging special topics listings. Almost every program has, here at Purdue, they are courses with a 95 on them. At the graduate level, they're typically 695. Those special topics listings, it's a special topics in bioinformatics or biomechanics or biochemistry. It's sort of a blanket course that's listed with our registrar as a rotating or variable title. And so depending on what's being taught, they all get the same number, but they get a different name. That's something that's already on the books, that department curriculum committee has said, we're willing to let people teach some special topics things in this kind of a way. And it usually takes going through something that's in a special topics listing 2 or 3 or 4 times, depending on the program, before it's time to have the conversation that says, you know what, this is a real thing. It's going to keep going. We're probably going to do it every year. Let's talk about making it a real class and giving it a real number. Other options, if the whole concept of pursuing a 16-week class is a little overwhelming, and it can be, do you have 8-week options? Do you have short course kind of options? Those are more common in the summer, but at Purdue here, even during the semester, we do 8-week options. You can do a first 8 weeks or a second 8 weeks. That might be a 1 or a 2 credit option rather than a full 3 or a 4, which sometimes is a little bit easier to think about the workload that's going to go into that as well. The other option is there a way to start or participate in a seminar kind of class that might be a non-credit bearing kind of space? We'll see that most of the things that we have as librarians that we've moved into teaching are really in the electives space. And we don't have a library program here on campus, so we aren't trying to be faculty of library science. We are really trying to develop those spaces where the information science and the library skills are best embedded and truly learned as part of that disciplinary knowledge and skill that they will need and will probably be better taught and potentially better learned if you're working with that disciplinary faculty member in collaboration instead of just them trying to do it themselves, which depending on the experience or the age of that faculty member might mean giving a whole lot of information that has changed dramatically over the years. So there's a lot of space for things in there. Other tips and advice, and some of these I've mentioned already. If you have an opportunity to help develop and engage active learning techniques, that's going to help set you aside and set you apart and really maybe fuel a word of mouth. I was trying to look for the right word there. Ways that are going to cause people to say, you know what, this was a really good class. And not only did I didn't have to just sit and listen, we had the opportunity to engage with this or use this information in this way or really apply what we were doing. Those are all things that tend to not only help you as the instructor and how you interact with the students, but tend to generate stronger learning and stronger connections as well. One of the other places that at Purdue we've really started to see some opportunities is we have a relatively new honors college on campus, and they continue to put out open calls. So sort of like what happened with me with the new program that has been developed, our honors college is saying, you know, pitch us some class ideas. Tell us, you know, what your space of expertise is and how you want to leverage that and pull that into a course that we can offer the students that are in this space. In particular, we've got one of our data science people who has a women's studies or a feminist background, and she's doing feminist research in a data science space as an honors class. So that's another place where you can often find places where perhaps you can reach out and start developing courses. All of us have absolutely acknowledged that the fact that we are faculty on campus makes something of a difference in starting these conversations and having these conversations and keeping them going. It puts you in a spot that you may have to remind the faculty that you're dealing with, the disciplinary faculty, that you are also faculty, but it does start to help change their thinking from just sort of that service librarian kind of stereotypical space they may have put us in. And if you are headed down this road, don't be shy, whether it's you or your supervisor or the associate dean who is further up the line from all of you, who's the one in the conversation. Be sure to negotiate that compensation. When you're getting on to co-instructor or official instructor of record, there is enough work going on that this isn't just the stuff the library does to come have their conversation. And so standing up for yourself as a professional, as well as an instructor, and really making sure that those pieces are happening, or that somebody is advocating for you that those pieces are happening. And as a quick last slide here before we open this up to all sorts of questions, hopefully, that you guys have. Benefits and challenges. We have definitely seen, as we're in the classroom more and interacting with faculty in that role more, an improved perception of us as faculty. That started as we started ramping up our research even more in the last 8 or 10 years here at Purdue, but the presence in the classroom also changes that. It does lead to more connections and more requests. We find people like, oh, you can do that, or wow, you've got these skills, or I heard from so-and-so that you did a really good job with that. Can you do something similar for me? Or how do I leverage those kinds of opportunities or skills in my class or in a new class that maybe my program needs? For me, one of the benefits is an opportunity to connect with students on a level that I don't typically get in my liaison work, because we do a lot of one-on-one consultations or other kinds of interactions and conversations, but I don't get that chance to connect with students for a full semester or even half a semester. So for me, that's definitely a benefit. And really having a context for including those information literacy skills. So instead of just teaching these skills in a disconnected kind of, here's how you do X, Y, or Z, really having a context, whether it's a course that you've developed, or whether it's that you're helping embed those information literacy skills into something that you are co-developing, really having them in a context where the students need to use them and really begin to understand them as part of their design project, or their English paper, which is a fairly classic one, or some of those other places, to have them connected really helps assist that learning. Some of the big challenges, it's time intensive. I'm not gonna lie, it's amazing what this can do to your schedule in a semester. If you've got a full 4-hour class that you're teaching, with your prep, your teaching, your grading, sometimes even if you have a TA or GA with you to help, that can be an amazing time sink. It's one of those where we need to keep in mind that even the disciplinary faculty, 2 courses in a semester at most universities, unless it's a teaching university, that's a full teaching load. And really, that's 50% of your time. So there isn't a whole lot of time left for doing other things. And from the library side, they're really, while the interactions are more robust and more in-depth, there really is a strong potential that we end up reaching fewer students because we aren't seeing them, a lot of students on those one-off kinds of bases that we would get through all of our one-shots. So I think there's a place for both of those as we move forward and really sort of grow into what are our skills and our roles as teachers. And that is the end of my slides. Oh, sure. So Matt's question was, can I say a little bit more about how I balance my librarian time and my instructor time in those semesters when I'm teaching? I have had some semesters when it has gone pretty well and some semesters where I felt like I really wasn't doing anything but teaching, so I don't think I balanced them very well at all. And that's pretty fresh in my mind because that would have been fall semester for me. Techniques on how to do that. I try and really, part of this is the engineer in me. I try and be fairly compartmentalized as much as possible. And so if there is, grading kinds of things hopefully are happening, potentially they end up out of the typical workday. Making sure that I'm keeping time for those regular library commitments. That often means blocking time in my calendar. So, instead of sitting on the reference desk here at Purdue, our liaison hours, we often spend a couple of hours a week out in the department. So we're in a place where the graduate students are more frequently going to be there rather than perhaps in the library with us. And so making sure that some of those things are happening. I will say when the teaching load gets too high, I found myself feeling very disconnected from the libraries last semester. I didn't make any of our libraries faculty meetings in that semester. The other piece that helps with that in sort of staying connected and balancing the library time is going to depend on what your communication style from your supervisor or somebody else further up the line is like. If they regularly will send summaries of meetings or things that have happened, that helps you stay in touch. So that's definitely a benefit when you're feeling like you're being pulled in a lot of other directions. But it's a huge challenge. I'm not sure if there were sort of specific things you were looking for there. But that's a little bit about sort of what I went through, particularly last semester. Semesters before that, when my co-teaching load has been a little more even, where I haven't felt like I'm the one leading the class as much as I was last semester, or when it hasn't been, in this case, it was a studio class, so while it was only 4 credit hours, it was 8 hours of time in the classroom every week. And so that puts a big damper on things because 25% of your time is nominally only 10 hours a week. And so you've already pretty much spent all of that just by being in the classroom. So there's some honesty in those negotiations. You know, are you buying me out for 25% of my time, but really getting 50% of my time? Well, that's not fair for any of us all the way around. So trying to be very honest about how much time it's going to take to do something as well. Do I find part-time subs for reference desk shifts and semesters when I teach, and what other models have I used for release time? Like so many of my colleagues in librarianship, we aren't good at saying no and actually finding release time for some of these things. I will say at Purdue, we have moved to a model where we don't have a reference desk. We have combined circulation and reference desks now, which are staffed almost entirely by students and paraprofessionals. So our librarians don't actually have time on a reference desk. So I don't have to worry about the reference desk shifts in the same way. I was typically able to maintain most of my hours out in my departments, which I find really valuable because, again, that gives me some of those additional connections back to students. And if no students come to see me, it's a dedicated 2 hours to catch up on some email and some of those other pieces that really aren't happening. What other models for release time? Depending on what else you've got going on or what's being expected of you for meetings or other sorts of things. I mean, obviously, if you've got sort of dedicated reference time, it's very much like faculty buying themselves out of their teaching time to do their research. How are you sort of buying yourself out of your reference time so that you have an opportunity to teach? And whether that's, you know, you've got a colleague who isn't teaching that semester or who maybe isn't a strong teacher but is really good on the reference desk, do you have that conversation as a unit to say, okay, so this person's going to take a little bit more time on the reference desk so that frees up our other people to be out doing more of this teaching? What do I consider too high a teaching load? Wow. I would have said last semester was too high, and that came down to the style of class it was and that I was in the classroom 8 hours a week. I have a colleague right now who is teaching 2 classes, and I would say she probably feels like that's too high a load as well. For all of the other stuff that we're expected to do as librarians and librarianship, even as invisible as it may be to the faculty and the other people across our campuses, so, you know, maintaining a library and keeping up with our collections and all of the decisions that go around all of those pieces, as well as the reference desk or the online chat or the email questions, all of those pieces that come in that are sort of invisible to the outside world of the faculty and sometimes even the students. Those things take real time out of our day, and they tend not to be, they don't tend always to be considered in these conversations. So very much like typical faculty, 2 is a lot. It really is for teaching in a semester. So I would say in most cases, particularly for librarians, that 1 class, if it's going to be a full semester class, 1 class is probably a good level. If you're doing short courses, maybe you can do more than 1, but you need to keep track of your own sort of work-life balance and mental health and facility as you're going through these pieces as well. Because it's a very different kind of stress. I mean, I think we've all gotten used to the library piece, and we know sort of what those jobs are, and while maybe we're juggling more of them than we need to or perhaps should, they're comfortable, and so they're easier to do that with. Often when we're moving into this teaching role, we're also moving into some things that maybe aren't quite as comfortable for us, particularly in the first time or 2 we're doing them, and that makes it feel like it's an even higher expectation on our time and our load, I would say.
We'll say thank you so much, Amy. It was very informative and very interesting.
Oh, good.
And I think a different model than a lot of our libraries have.
And well, and it's been a relatively new one here at Purdue as well, so I can see where it'd be different for everybody. It certainly was not the model I was encountering before I came to Purdue either. Well, even in my first 6 or 7 years here at Purdue. I will say to people, I mean, you've got my name and such, and it was on the advertisement. I'm really easy to find, but my email is just my last name at purdue.edu. So if questions occur to you, or if you want to ask me something more in depth offline, or that doesn't feel like this is the right avenue, please feel free to do that. Well, I hope you all have a good afternoon, and I was happy to be here and talk with you.